So let me ask you, how's your prayer life going? Now, we all know there are many different aspects of prayer, and if you're like me, sometimes you feel very close to God in your prayers, and sometimes it can seem that God is very distant, and you really wonder, is God even listening to my prayers? And so one aspect of prayer then can be discouragement. And again, I asked, do you ever feel discouraged in your prayer life? I think we probably most all of us have had that experience of feeling a sense of discouragement. Wondering if our prayers are being answered or if they're just kind of bouncing off the ceiling and God isn't hearing them. Well, today, Jesus teaches us about the importance of staying persistent in prayer, especially when we feel like God is not answering our prayers. Now, in today's gospel, Jesus is traveling toward Jerusalem and toward the cross, and he's stopped to do some teaching. And right before his teaching for today, he's teaching about the end of times, or the coming of God's kingdom, when God's kingdom will be fulfilled, and God will heal all of creation, and justice will be established among all peoples. But Jesus is pointing ahead to what will come in the future. And it's within this context that Jesus shifts the discussion to the topic of prayer. And Jesus teaches us the importance of being persistent in prayer and relying on God while we await the fullness of time. Even though this world continues to be filled with pain and violence and injustice. And so to help us in this, Jesus tells a parable. And that's classic JC, right? Yeah, instead of just saying, this is what I want to tell you, he says, well, let me tell you a story. But in this one, he kind of tells us right up front what it's about, right? He says, well, this one's about praying always and not losing heart. And the parable focuses on a widow who's dealing with a judge in a corrupt justice system. And twice we're told that the judge neither feared God nor had respect for people. So in other words, he was unjust. And that's why he's titled The Unjust Judge. But despite this, the widow repeatedly comes to the judge asking for justice. And then in verse 3, the widow demands to the judge, grant me justice against my opponent, or the one who has treated me unjustly. And what was the initial reaction of the judge to this widow? He didn't do anything, kind of just wanted to get rid of her, right? Thought she might become an annoyance, which she did become an annoyance. So. Now, for the first listeners of this parable, those who are followers of the Jewish faith, this would have been appalling. In the ancient Hebrew text, widows are counted among the most destitute of society, just like the poor and orphans and immigrants. And so there are biblical texts, for example, Exodus and Deuteronomy, that makes provisions for them, helping to ensure that those people are not exploited, that they're not taken advantage of. And so like any good storyteller, then Jesus has added a sense of tension and intrigue to this parable, right? So his first listeners, they'd be perked up because they're thinking, this is not right. This is not right. Well then, Jesus tells of how this widow takes matters into her own hands. And the judge won't grant her justice that she's deserving of, and so she gets feisty with him, right? She's mad, and she's not going to take it. And her persistence and call for justice are such that the judge characterizes her actions as those of a boxer or a fighter. And we miss this in our English translation. That's where in the Greek it's a lot more interesting. And let me just read you. This is verse 5 now. You can compare it to what you have in front of you. This is verse 5 from the Greek and the more literal translation is this is what it says. Verse 5. This is the judge speaking now. Because this widow causes trouble for me, I will give her justice so that she may not in the end give me a black eye by her coming. Right? And our English translation misses this boxing metaphor. Right? And it kind of, our English translation kind of softens then the tenacity of this widow and her status as a troublemaker to that unjust system. And so this widow is willing to get into, she wants to give this guy go right in there and punch him out. And so, again, we see the tenacity of this woman. She's willing to do whatever it takes to get this judge to act appropriately on her behalf. And so here we see that Jesus adds not only tension to his story, but as a good storyteller, he also adds humor, right? And we can imagine that when people who first heard this story, we can imagine them chuckling at the thought of this lowly widow pounding on this judge who does not want to extend justice. She wants to sock him, give the guy a black eye so everybody can see that he's not responding as he should be. And as biblical commentators have written, the humor in this scene is meant to poke fun at the powers that be by criticizing and upending the unjust system that's stacked against then widows and orphans and immigrants. And so it's meant to poke fun at that. It's kind of like our political cartoons today. Jesus' parable encourages us to laugh at those who wield their power unethically and unjustly. We laugh, though, to challenge these leaders and to offer a different way. And so the widow represented then a troublemaker to the unjust system of her day. And that phrase, troublemaker, reminds me of someone that you might know who I'm talking about, is quite well known. John Lewis, representative, is congressman, quite well icon of the civil rights movement, passed away not too long ago. Peace be to his memory. But he famously said, what did he famously say?
Make good trouble.
Get in good trouble, all right? So, get in good trouble, necessary trouble, and help redeem the soul of America. And I don't know if this parable inspired him in that way to get into good trouble, but that's what this widow was doing. She was getting into good trouble. And so this parable is not only about prayer, but also about the work of seeking justice. And in our day and age, that's economic and racial and environmental justice. That this widow is an inspiration, not just to pray, but to get into good trouble, to be troublemakers in an unjust system, in an unjust world. So, are you with me? Okay. So, after delivering this short and punchy parable, okay, I know, it's a groaner, I know. So let's just take a minute, let's just all groan together. Okay, get that out. So after this short and punchy parable, Jesus offers some concluding comments that touch at the character of God. And he uses the judge's words as a transition to speak about God's deliverance of justice, which God dispenses in verse 7 to those, it says, who cry out to him day and night. But the real comparison here is one of contrast. God is in fact not like this reluctantly responsive judge. God does not need to be badgered into listening to us. And when God does respond, God does so willingly. And if anything, God is more like the widow in her relentless commitment to justice. And I love that image that really God is more like the widow than anything like the judge in this story that Jesus tells. Now, the widow also serves as an example of how the followers of Jesus are to be oriented toward God as we await the return of Jesus and the fullness of God's kingdom. And we know that Jesus is telling us because he's letting his disciples then and now know that there's going to have to be a real time of patience, waiting for God to fulfill God's plan. And so, and Luke's gospel has pointed out to the fact that Jesus lets us know that his return, before his return, there will be a long delay, and that we can expect that. And so how are we to act then as we wait and as we wonder why things don't happen more quickly? How are we supposed to respond? Well, followers who are discouraged are not to lose heart, but to maintain faith and prayer as we await the return of justice, or the return of Jesus, and God's justice, or God's fairness, or the fullness of God's kingdom. And so Jesus says, well, if we're discouraged, don't, keep your faith, keep your prayer going. So how are we to act if God's justice is not delivered according to our timeline? Well, we have the widow as an example, right? We are not to wait quietly and accept the cruelty of the world around us and the oppression of people. But instead, like the widow, we are to resist injustice and actively seek God and God's will in the world. And also, believers who are discouraged by injustice in the world and who wonder whether God is at all moved by our prayers are given comfort and encouragement not to lose heart. Jesus encourages us to be persistent in prayer because at times it can be very easy to give up. And so Jesus wants us to know that's going to be something we're going to experience, that kind of discouragement. And so he wants to give us comfort and also encouragement in this, right? So, for example, you might be praying about an illness or have been praying about an illness or a health issue that doesn't seem to change, or praying for a change in a relationship, or for global issues such as poverty or homelessness or the environment or racism or gun violence. And it's easy to grow weary and to give up. It can seem like God isn't listening, right? And I think we can all think of those kinds of examples in our lives. I think, just for example, one is now with the increasing chance of war in our world. And it seemed like, after the Cold War was over and all of that, it seemed like we were entering a more peaceful time in our world. And now we know Russia has invaded Ukraine and don't know where that's all headed. And China seems to be mounting their forces. And so it gets, if you're like me, it gets discouraging. You think, gee, we were making progress and now we're going back, right? Or things like racial justice. It seems like we take a couple steps forward and then all of a sudden we take one or two steps backward in our country, and it gets discouraging. You think, why can't we get past some of these things? Yeah? It gets discouraging. So Jesus encourages us then to keep praying, because the source of our struggle is often what keeps us connected to God. And history shows that God's timeline is usually not the same as ours. And prayers for justice and fairness in the world may take generations to receive its answer. And so we're only seeing a part of how God is working this out in the world. A favorite Christian author of mine is a man named Philip Yancey. You might have heard of him. One of his books is entitled Prayer Doesn't Make Any Difference. And it seems to me so many books I've read on prayer are very trite and overly simplistic. And one of the things I like about this particular book, that he gives a real thorough discussion on many aspects of prayer, and especially over our questions and struggles with prayer. So often you read books about prayer and they give you these, oh, if you just do this, this, and this, your prayers are answered. Well, for me anyway, it doesn't seem to work that way. And I like, in this book, he really looks at struggles and questions that we have related to prayer and our faith life. And so he gives a few things that, or he offers reasons to continue to pray even when it seems like our prayers are not being answered. And I just share a few of these with you this morning. So this one is persistent prayer keeps bringing God and me together. And that's when I pray, I can share my burdens and learn of God's love and God's continuing love for me, which better equips me to discern what God is doing on this earth. And when we stop praying, it cuts us off from God then, and the power of God's love in our lives. So it's so important, especially when discouraged, to keep praying, persistent prayer. Then also, persistent prayer helps me to see the world in my life through God's eyes. Right? We have such narrow vision. We have to see the world through God's eyes. And as the relationship progresses, I realize that God has a clear picture of what I need to be about. And I can get on the same page with God. I can get on with God's agenda. Usually we want God to get on to my agenda, right? But through persistent prayer, I can get on with what is God's agenda. And then prayer is not meant to change God, but the one who prays. And that's an important distinction, right? Because we often think if I just pray the right, God's going to get on my agenda, and God's going to do this for me. But prayer really is about how God is changing me in my life to become more like God and the way God sees the world. Right? And then in persistent prayer, my own desires and plans gradually harmonize with God's. Isn't that beautiful? Because that's really where we want to be, isn't it? We want to be in sync, in harmony with what God's plan is. And that's really the sweet spot that we hope for. Yeah? So in our prayers, at times we may feel like the widow, alone, powerless, or a victim of unfairness, but the reality is the opposite. Because we have both an advocate and a direct line to a loving God who has nothing in common with the insensitive judge in the story. But Jesus points us to the assurance of God's grace and mercy and God's desire to answer prayer. So waiting and feelings of discouragement can be a test of faith, and the best response is that of persistent prayer. Amen.
Amen.